so pronounced.
Yes, and you don't normally see pink color in the sky or that kind of a light red. So obviously it brought their attention to him quite quickly. It sounds like.
Wouldn't have been a meteor since there were 6 of them, because as you correctly point out, it wouldn't have been any kind of aircraft, because they're forbidden under law to have anything but a red, green, or white light on them. So pink would be forbidden, would violate the law. And these reports are coming in with what I find to be an unsettling regularity. Something is going on, is my opinion. The nature of the reports I am receiving today is, in my opinion, different from the nature of the reports that I was getting just 5 or 6 years ago. These objects are showing themselves much more overtly. They don't seem at all worried about whether they're being seen or not. And the objects are no longer just lights in the sky, but actual palpable ships or craft.
Well, it does seem that things are heating up, or at least you're getting more reports. Maybe people are more comfortable sending reports to the National UFO Reporting Center. I'm not sure, but talk about overt. You mentioned to me the other day when we were talking about 2 actual alien creatures that were walking on the side of a highway.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? A gentleman submitted a report, and I've forgotten the date. I think it was the 25th or 26th of July, just last month. He was driving from Medford, Oregon to Newburgh to get on Interstate 5 on his way to work. And to his amazement, he looked up ahead of his car. This is 6:45 in the morning. He looked up ahead of his car, and he saw 2 very peculiar human-like creatures walking. They were wearing mid-calf length black boots. They were identically dressed, almost as if they were maybe members of a band or something. And they had very tight-fitting uniforms on. They were very tall, 6'3", he estimated minimum height. And they had gray or silver vests on. And as he drove by them, again at 6:45 in the morning, it was odd to see them out there because there's no sidewalk on this highway. They were walking on the edge of the highway, which is not very smart at 6:45 in the morning. And as he drove by, he turned his head to the right to get a glimpse of the faces of these, he thought, hikers or walkers. And just as he turned to look at them, they turned their heads away from him. He thought it was almost as if they didn't want him to see their faces.
Yeah, so simultaneously they turned away from this guy when his car drives by. That's fascinating.
Yeah, very unusual. So we don't know who they were or what they were, but I've talked to the source of the report, and he sounds like a very sober-minded, reliable type witness. So
yeah, and
if it's go ahead.
Well, suffice it to say, those 2 individuals were probably not seen very often around Newburgh, Oregon. In that neck of the woods.
No, and what would they be doing out there? Probably a good mile or 2 from the nearest settlement on a highway in the early morning hours, on a highway that has no sidewalk, and walking on the edge of the road. Not hitchhiking, apparently.
Well, and it's fascinating to me. Yeah, exactly. They weren't asking for a ride, but it is fascinating to think that this gentleman didn't pause or stop to see what was going on. Maybe he had a little fear of who they were, but Also, there could be a little bit of mind control going on there as well with any kind of screen memory that was going on. Those are fascinating reports. I just can't believe that you are able to field these kinds of calls, Peter, on a regular basis, and I really appreciate the fact that you get these sightings out to the public as quickly as possible. And now that Christian Stepien is coming back, we'll get a whole slew of them on the National UFO Reporting Center, I'm assuming so. Why don't you tell folks how they can get a hold of you guys, how they can submit a report if they've seen something recently or if they've seen a historical event that they should report?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share that information. People can send us information either over our telephone hotline, and I'll give that number in a moment, or ultimately we ask them to submit detailed written reports using our online report form. Our hotline telephone number is area code 206-722-3000, and our website is ufocenter.com. And for those people in Europe, we spell center strangely over here in the colonies. It's UFOCENTER as opposed to TRE. So
right.
ufocenter.com and 206-722-3000.
Wonderful, Peter. I really appreciate the opportunity for you to come on and bring us up to date on what's going on out there. It sounds like there is some definite ramping up going on.
There's certainly some strange things happening on our planet, and it's a privilege to bring them to the host and the audience of Night Talk Radio.
Well, anytime that you have the opportunity, please feel free to call into my show, which is every Saturday night, folks. I'll remind everyone from 7 to 10 p.m. on Saturdays on nightdreamstalkradio.com. And Peter, once again, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the time, Michael. Good night.
Good night. Yep. Well, folks, you know, it's not very often that we get an opportunity to talk with the famed ufologist, Peter Davenport, and the things that he is coming into when he goes to the... is that Gary on the line there, it sounds like?
This is Vince.
Oh, thank heavens, Vince. Izunza is here with me from Pacific Northward, and we are about to, I believe, Vince, get a little paranormal news update from you. We just had Peter Davenport on the line, so thanks for joining me.
Oh, well, Peter is a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best.
Yes, he is. But if anybody could do that, it would be Vince Yazunza. Now let me see if I it's N like I pronounce that Y like in I.
Like an I.
Like an
Inzunza.
Thank you
Inzunza.
very much. I like it. By the way,
it's like a really good, expensive dish you would get at a fancy restaurant.
Oh, it does, and it would be so hard to. It would be so hard to pronounce that people would definitely want to pay for whatever price they would have for sure. And matter of fact, let's
quality.
Oh, of course. Let's also mention before we get into some of the news updates that Izunza is a Basque name. Isn't that correct?
Yes, it's a Basque name for a burial swamp.
Oh, is that what it translates to be? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, the Basque people used to throw their dead into a swamp, and that was called the Insunza.
Very interesting. I can't imagine why well, it's very possible, there you go, that maybe your ancestors were the folks who actually embalmed folks or took care of the bodies after they died. I don't know. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I like to think so, and I also like to think it's probably why I'm so full of spirits.
There you go. Yes, you've definitely got that historic bloodline going there for sure. All right. Well, listen. Let's go. Let's go on because you had texted me earlier tonight with some real interesting news update that we should kind of disseminate to the worldwide audience now, as they tune in to Night Dreams Talk Radio for the latest breaking paranormal news.
Yes, well, a big story that has been popping up a lot in my news feed, and I've had maybe about 30 people send me the same link, or news link, but the Virginia congressional race has a bit of Bigfoot in it, a bit of controversy. Apparently, the Republican candidate, I believe his name is Denver Riggleman, I think. I'm going off of memory here. His opponent, Leslie Cockburn, has made a claim that her opponent, Denver, is not only a white supremacist, but he's also into Bigfoot erotica. Like the man has some sexual fetish for Bigfoot. And that's now in mainstream news.
It is in mainstream news. I was just totally blown away when you sent me the link, and I looked it up, and this is big-time mainstream news right now all across the United States. And the whole idea that Bigfoot is getting a national press is kind of interesting because that doesn't happen very often. But now we're getting to Bigfoot erotica. Now, how strange can that be?
Well, it's pretty strange, but it's not new. If you read very early reports of Sasquatch encounters, especially in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I live, you find these cautionary tales of Sasquatch coming into a village, stealing away a lovely young bride, and then maybe 20 years later, these half-human, half-Sasquatch hybrids emerged into the village. Back in the 70s, even, there was kind of this really special era in the late 70s through the mid-80s where suddenly camcorders became affordable to people. So you find this whole new genre of indie film that sprung up from that. And from that, there was a very specific subgenre of Bigfoot erotica that happens. It's very cheaply produced, but there's if you're a VHS hunter, there's some really strange romantic Bigfoot tapes out there.
Yeah, and that is definitely a historic fact that the Native Americans, First Nations, have had stories for generations of women and young girls, even in their tribes, being stolen by some kind of a forest creature. Sometimes they get recovered, and most of the time they don't. And you're right, there are stories of hybrid people showing up in the wilderness, almost feral people, children, and that have just really people don't understand what the possibilities are there. And of course, then with Melba Ketchum coming out with her analysis of the supposed Bigfoot DNA, it's coming out that maybe the Bigfoot is not that far away from human itself. So interesting stories, Vince. That's something that you picked right out of the national news that comes right to the paranormal subject big time.
Yeah, and with Bigfoot DNA potentially being so close to humans, perhaps one day human Bigfoot love will not be so frowned upon, and there will be a whole new species that we can call our brothers.
Exactly. And it is interesting.
I like to look to the future, Michael. I like to be optimistic about the possibilities of life.
Yes, definitely. That's why you run Pacific North Weird, because that is always forward thinking. That's for sure. It's interesting that opponent that was claimed to have an interest in this Bigfoot erotica. One of the things that the opponent of that person was pointing at was the fact that this guy had actually written some books on Bigfoot. And I thought that was interesting that a person running for a high office